Israel's Supreme Planning Council is set to approve further expansion of illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. Nearly 6,000 housing units are likely to be approved, and 3 illegal outposts are being formalized under Israeli law. While the Supreme Planning Council is holding the meeting in Beht. It's the first time such planning has been deliberated since the far-right finance minister and settler activist Bezalel Smotrich was put in charge of settlement policy. Harry Fawcett reports from the occupied West Bank.
Jamal Abu Ayash has borne an immeasurable loss in defense of a small patch of family land.
I inherited from my father, him from his father, 4 generations in the family.
His son Jamil was killed by Israeli soldiers in 2021 during protests against the illegal Israeli outpost known as Eviatar. All settlements are illegal under international law. Outposts like Eviatar are illegal under Israeli law. The government's ejected settlers from the hilltop in the past. But in 2021, it promised they could return permanently once Eviatar had been made a formal settlement. That now looks all but certain.
They will enlarge the settlement. There's nothing we can do. The Arab rulers have betrayed us. We have nothing but stones. All Israeli government-supported settlements, not only this one.
The man now in charge of settlement decisions is Finance Minister and far-right settler activist Bezalel Smotrich. This was him in Eviatar in April.
This place will be bustling with Jewish life, with heads held high, proud, and who love the land and the Bible.
Israel is expected to advance thousands of new settler homes on Monday. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls it a response to terrorism. It's also set to initiate the formalizing of 3 outposts close to the illegal settlement of Eli, near to where a Palestinian shooting attack killed 4 Israeli settlers last week. And as existing outposts are being endorsed by this Israeli government, new ones are springing up, at least 6 built in the last week amid an outburst of violence. The Palestinian attack was preceded by a large-scale Israeli raid on the city of Jenin, killing 7 Palestinians. It was followed by a wave of settler attacks on Palestinian communities, and these hastily built new outposts, often in strategic positions between existing settlements.
This is a new danger that threatens the Palestinian population on their lands. These outposts have also become a launch pad for gangs of hilltop youths to carry out their attacks on the Palestinians and their houses in nearby villages.
From 2012 to 2022, the UN says the settler population grew by more than a third to over 700,000. But international pressure and security and legal concerns had seen some constraints on building, and especially on attempts to formalize outposts. For Israel's new government, accelerated settlement expansion is a declared priority, and legalizing outposts is becoming part of the program. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera, in the occupied West Bank.
We've got 2 teams covering developments. In a moment, we're going to go to Nida Ibrahim, who's in Bethlehem, overlooking several illegal settlements. First, we're going to go to Imran Khan, who's live for us in the Givat Ze'ev settlement in the occupied West Bank. Imran, we're getting news lines in saying that Israeli media has apparently is saying that the officials have approved plans for 5,000 new homes. What do we know about this plan?
Well, it was to be expected. They were meeting today in Beht to try and decide how many of those settlements they could actually pass. Some of them may not have passed due to technical specifics, but politically speaking, this is a very big victory for Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister. Now, it used to be a very complicated process to be able to approve a settlement expansion. It was 6 phases. Those 6 phases took in security considerations, political considerations. They even took in things like who was going to get the contract to actually build the settlement expansions. And there was also the Supreme Court involved as well. They simply dispensed with that last week in a cabinet decision chaired by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They handed all of those 6 phases to Bezalel Smotrich, who now is almost in total control. And because of that, they were able to approve all of these 5,000 settlements. Let me just show you what that means in the occupied West Bank where I am. So you see, that's an illegal settlement under international law. They're being constructed. Some buildings are already up. 900 new settlement units will be approved here. And there are 2 types of settlers. There are those who are economic settlers who come here because the housing's actually quite cheap, the schools are good, and they come here because they can afford to live here rather than places like Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. And then there are the ideological settlers. These are the people who call the occupied West Bank Judea and Samaria, and they say that this land was promised to them in the Bible, and they're going to stay here. Now, these settlements have been built in increasing number since the 80s, but now they are actually changing the facts on the ground. Where I'm stood is supposed to be the state of Palestine if the two-state solution is ever agreed upon. But when you have settlements like this in such large number, it's very difficult to get rid of these people from these permanent places. So it becomes very difficult to negotiate a state of Palestine. And that's what the Palestinians are really concerned about. But with Bezalel Smotrich almost in complete control and approving these 5,000 new settlements, he's got a success. He's got something that he can play to the gallery with. His supporters are predominantly settlers, and this is a big victory for him.
Over the last 25 weeks or so, I think Al Jazeera has been reporting on those big protests in Israel over plans to change the legal system. How much of a priority is settlement expansion for Israelis?
Well, the protests in Tel Aviv on Saturday night that get about 100,000 people are very internal Israeli politics. This is about the threat to democracy that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's judicial changes bill is pushing through and has pushed through. They're not really concerned about the settlements per se. However, because of the way the Supreme Court's set up, it can actually stop settlement building. And that is something that they are concerned about. They're concerned about the idea that you can strip away the Supreme Court's power. Now, the far right of the ruling coalition, Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir, the National Security Minister, actually says that the protesters are anti-democratic, that they don't understand what they're protesting for, that the Supreme Court has far too much power. So it's a bit of an intricate situation. But not many people are concerned about the actual settlements in the West Bank. They're much more concerned about the assault on democracy within Israel itself. But within that, the Supreme Court, of course, the settlements come into it.
Imran, thank you very much indeed. That's Imran Khan talking to us from the Givat Ze'ev illegal settlement in the occupied West Bank. Well, Israel has consistently expanded the number of its illegal settlements. Between 1967 and 2022, they built more than 290 of them across the occupied West Bank, with an estimated 460,000 settlers living there. Israel has also built several enclaves in Palestinian neighborhoods in occupied East Jerusalem, where more than 220,000 Israeli settlers live. The settlements violate international law, and the large number of Israelis who live there make it difficult to establish a Palestinian state. Nida Ibrahim is joining us live now from Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank. How worrying is all of this going to be for Palestinians, Nida?
The settlement issue has been the issue that Palestinians have been talking about for years, if not decades. They say, how can we have, as Palestinians, a contiguous state with territorial continuity when Israel keeps building settlements? What happened is that in so many numerous times, Palestinians have told the international community, okay, you want us to negotiate on a state, on the 67 borders, what have you. You can't have Israel building on the lands that are going to be part of the future state. Of course, the latest such, let's say, commitment from Israel came in March when Palestinians and Israelis were meeting in a meeting under the auspices of the Americans to kind of bring a calmness to the situation here in the occupied West Bank. And there has been promises that no new announcements were made. But as you've just reported, we're seeing new illegal settlement building units are being announced. I'm standing here in front of one settlement. It is built on the lands of the city of Beht here in the occupied West Bank. This started off in the early 90s as a small settlement. And if you can see now, as it is the case with so many other settlements, they're becoming sort of like cities with playgrounds, with access to water infrastructure, electricity, roads. And on the other side of the fence, because you can see there is an Israeli-built fence here, you have Palestinians who are struggling to get water, struggling to get resources. Even their access to Jerusalem. Bethlehem is very close to Jerusalem. It has been severed by those settlements, by the separation wall that has been built by Israel. When it comes to Palestinians, they would tell you that we've given the political process so many chances and they've failed. Look, we're losing more lands as we speak. So for them, the armed confrontation has been really the reason or the way for them to move forward and basically make the world listen to them.
Nida Ibrahim talking to us from Bethlehem in the occupied West Bank. Nida, thank you very much.